Given all of the efforts Darth Vader had to make simply to become proficient at moving once he was forced to endure his suit and cybernetics following his defeat to Obi-Wan on Mustafar, it's not surprising that Vader's lightsaber combat form and technique also changed significantly after Episode 3 and throughout the Imperial era. As we'll see, by the time of Episode 4, Vader's lightsaber combat form wasn't just different from that which he utilized as a Jedi and in his duel with Obi-Wan in Episode 3, but also from the combat form and techniques he would use in the earliest weeks and months after the Clone War. To start, it's necessary to understand what lightsaber combat form Anakin Skywalker used against Dooku in Episode 3, as this wasn't only an early situation where the Jedi Knight would utilize the dark side with his lightsaber combat form being influenced by this action, but it would also be what Vader would use against Obi-Wan on Mustafar. By Episode 3, Anakin was a master of Form 5, the fifth lightsaber combat form recognized by the Jedi Order. In fact, as Dooku recognized, Anakin was already one of the best Form 5 duelists he'd ever seen, with his own Form 2 unable to match the power of Anakin's lightsaber abilities. Form 5, specifically its Gemso variant used by Anakin, was one of the most physically demanding forms, as it required a focus on strength and power. Specifically developed for lightsaber-to-lightsaber combat, Form 5 was useful in deflecting an opponent's attack and then counter-attacking immediately, with devastating blows aimed at breaking through any defense. Anakin used these elements of Form 5 with devastating consequences against Dooku, with the Sith Lord recognizing that Anakin was attacking him with seemingly unstoppable power, and strikes that he could only deflect rather than meet directly. Even more, as Anakin began to tap into the power of the dark side, his Form 5 offensive attacks became even more devastating. As Darth Bane would explain, who was also a Gemso duelist himself, this lightsaber combat form was exceptionally powerful when combined with the dark side of the Force, where the dark side bolstered one's strength. For Bane, when the techniques of Form 5 were energized with anger, the strikes that were generated could create enough force to crack armor. As Anakin was pushed further and further towards the dark side, Dooku would recognize these aspects himself, with the strength and abilities of Anakin's lightsaber attack making Dooku's decades of lightsaber knowledge useless. Once Anakin joined the Sith and dark side as Darth Sidious's apprentice, these Form 5 techniques would be utilized by Darth Vader in his duel with Obi-Wan on Mustafar. However, with Vader now allied with the dark side of the Force, his lightsaber combat form was even more aggressive than briefly seen in Anakin's duel with Dooku, using the powerful Form 5 strikes recognized initially by Dooku and understood by Bane. Although Obi-Wan had years of experience in dueling Anakin during thousands of hours of lightsaber sparring, the Jedi Master was still surprised by the power of Vader, forced to retreat rather than meet Vader's attack directly. Ultimately, despite the aggressive and powerful Form 5 lightsaber combat techniques utilized by Vader, Obi-Wan was able to emerge victorious in their duel due to his use of the defensive techniques of his own Form 3, able to wait for Vader's frustration and impatience to result in a significant mistake that Obi-Wan waited for. Given that Form 5, and more specifically the Gemso variant used by Anakin and also Vader on Mustafar, focused on strength, counterattacks, and offensive moves, all of which were made even more powerful through the dark side, we might think that very little changed for Vader's lightsaber combat form and technique once he was forced to rely upon his new suit and cybernetics. As we'll see, while Form 5 would ultimately be utilized by Vader again in some ways during the Imperial era, the earliest weeks and months after Order 66 saw a significant change in Vader's lightsaber combat form, where the Sith Lord's techniques were noticeably different from those used by Vader on Mustafar. This isn't surprising, given the new realities Vader had to experience within his suit after Episode 3. The novel Dark Lord: The Rise of Darth Vader provides a number of ways in which his suit and cybernetics forced him to change and adapt his lightsaber techniques. For example, the boots of Vader's suit were by themselves a tremendous burden on his mobility. They fit poorly, were far too heavy, and the elevation in the heel of the boot all contributed to the significant lack of mobility Vader felt he had in the early weeks after Mustafar, where he believed he would have to utilize the Force simply to move. Even more, the weight of the armor plating located on Vader's chest meant that he was barely able to lift his arms above his head, again restricting his movement in a way where Vader knew he couldn't use the same lightsaber combat form he once did as Anakin. This is seen in the earliest duels Vader had against Jedi Knight Bolshatak and Jedi Master Roan Shrine. Only a few weeks after the Clone War, Vader traveled to the planet of Murkana to deal with a group of clone troopers who failed to execute Order 66. It was here where Vader would duel Bolsh attack in lightsaber combat. As explained from the perspective of Jedi Master Shrine, one of the more interesting aspects to the duel was the differences in the lightsaber techniques of the two duelists. While the Jedi Knight utilized agility and speed, the exact opposite could be said about Vader. While Shrine recognized Vader was incredibly powerful, the Sith Lord was clumsy when compared to his opponent and mostly utilized vertical strikes. In fact, it's here where we have confirmation that Vader no longer committed himself to the elements of Form 5 during the early weeks of the Empire, which had been so devastating to Anakin and Vader's opponents during the Clone War and on Mustafar. Instead, the Jedi Master recognized that Vader appeared to completely lack a style of his own. Most importantly, where Shrine did notice Vader was using stances and techniques connected to the 7 forms recognized by the Jedi Order, Vader didn't use Form 5 techniques, but instead Form 4 and Form 3, appearing to switch between techniques defined by aggressive offense and focused defense. The Jedi Knight was able to score a lightsaber strike on Vader's forearm, but the Sith Lord would ultimately emerge victorious. But victory for Vader was a result of his overwhelming power. While he once used Form 5 to outmatch even Dooku, the earliest weeks after Order 66 saw Vader utilizing techniques that weren't recognized within the traditional 7 forms of lightsaber combat, where his reliance on power and vertical strikes appeared clumsy. This was very similar to Vader's lightsaber style when he would duel Jedi Master Roan Shrine as well a few months into the Imperial era. Although Vader was far more skilled in this duel than he had been weeks earlier against Bolsh attack, we again see that he utilized lightsaber techniques that still weren't those of Form 5. Vader again simply focused on using his power to overwhelm his opponent, again using rapid slashes from left to right combined with powerful vertical strikes. Where Shrine did recognize some sort of style utilized by Vader, he simply referred to it as an old style that was the opposite of Form 2 used by Dooku, which doesn't appear to be something found within the 7 recognized forms, including Form 5. Vader merely closed the distance and relied on his strength through simple horizontal and vertical strikes. And when Shrine attempted to target Vader's cybernetics, the Sith Lord didn't hesitate to adopt a more defensive style, defending against the Jedi Master's attack. Through these early duels Vader had with Jedi survivors of Order 66 during the first year of the Empire, we might think that Vader simply utilized lightsaber techniques that weren't connected to the 7 traditional forms of lightsaber combat, with Vader relying only on the power and strength he obtained through the dark side and his suit to merely overwhelm his opponents. However, the Force Unleashed novelization reveals that during the Imperial era, Vader would eventually develop a lightsaber combat form where his initial skill with Form 5 was refined into a style that incorporated different techniques found within other traditional lightsaber combat forms. As seen within the novelization, just prior to the final duel between Vader and his former apprentice Starkiller on the Death Star, roughly 2 years before the events of Episode 4, Starkiller was confident that he knew exactly what to expect going into the duel, believing that he knew Vader's lightsaber combat form and techniques after training with him for years. Starkiller could recognize the 7 traditional lightsaber combat forms used by the Jedi Order, and therefore, he could define exactly which combat forms and techniques were used by Vader. Within the novel, Starkiller revealed that during the era of the Empire, Vader developed a refined version of Form 5, again using the Gemso variant he used in the final days of the Clone War and on Mustafar against Obi-Wan. Vader did not simply abandon his knowledge and experience with Form 5. In fact, in refining the combat form, Vader also added elements that were found within Form 2, Form 3, and Form 4, which would utilize the techniques of the most aggressive and defensive focus forms through Form 4 and Form 3 respectively, but also the precision of Form 2. As seen from the perspective of Starkiller, Vader had become a completely different lightsaber duelist from what he had been in the early weeks and months after Order 66. While Vader of course still relied upon his power, and could still occasionally appear clumsy due to his suit, Vader had without question emerged as a skilled and terrifying lightsaber duelist, who once again utilized the techniques he relied upon before his defeat to Obi-Wan. Starkiller recognized Vader was strong and relentless, but his new refined version of Form 5 also saw Vader make use of speed, balance, and tactics, showing he had numerous ways he could defeat his opponent in combat. Therefore, Vader's lightsaber combat form changed significantly over the course of the Imperial era. While he would begin by using the powerful and aggressive techniques of Form 5 against Obi-Wan on Mustafar, he would initially abandon the techniques of this lightsaber combat form after receiving a suit, relying primarily on his strength and power in the early months after Order 66. Although he used powerful strikes, which often appeared clumsy, he also switched between offensive and defensive stances and techniques when required to. However, Vader eventually made use of his vast skills and knowledge of Form 5 after Episode 3, where once he dueled Starkiller only 2 years before Episode 4, Vader developed a refined version of Form 5 for himself, where he incorporated additional lightsaber techniques from Form 2, Form 3, and Form 4. This demonstrates that although he did utilize his strength and power in lightsaber duels after he was forced to rely upon his suit, as Starkiller recognized, Vader was also tremendously skilled and able to defeat an opponent in lightsaber combat with more than just his overwhelming power. So there we have it, how Darth Vader's lightsaber combat form and technique changed after Episode 3 and during the Imperial era. Thank you very much to all of the Patreon members of Star Wars Reading Club, as your support is so greatly appreciated. You can find all of our social media links and a link to our Star Wars gaming channel in the description below for updates and even more Star Wars content. We love making these videos, so why not subscribe for more fun Star Wars theories and discussions. Also, if you enjoyed the video, think about giving a like or leaving a comment. If not for me... For Form 2.